telly, DAB and online. And what a cracking show we've got lined up for you today, folks. It's packed fuller than Britain's airports during this summer travel nightmare. Without the nightmare part, mind you, I'll be introducing, well, actually, there is one nightmare element. That'll be a debate with a representative from Animal Rebellion, the Jubilee celebration wreckers. But we'll also have a RAF Red Arrows pilot. Dr. Anna Whitelock will be here, director of the Centre for the Study of Modern Monarchy, and Peter Bowen, who goes into bat for Boris after this booing. But first, here's the news with Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2:01. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Princess Anne has arrived at the Epsom Derby as celebrations for the Platinum Jubilee weekend continues. The Princess Royal is representing the Queen at the event. Her Majesty, who's been experiencing some mobility problems, will miss the races this afternoon. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have arrived at Cardiff Castle with their two children. They're meeting performers and crew involved in the Jubilee concert taking place there this afternoon. Well, former jockey Dale Gibson told GB News the Derby is one of the most important races in the world.
We go back generations through history. Horses are bred to try and get a mile and a half in their 3-year-old career to come to the Epsom Derby. So if you've got a well-bred colt, you're hoping that it can stay the trip, and that's what you're looking for as an owner-breeder. So it's a big day in the racing calendar, a big day in the British sporting calendar as well. Not every horse can get here, not every horse makes it here, not every horse is good enough to be here.
Well, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge will pay tribute to the Queen this evening, addressing crowds at a Jubilee concert. The open-air show is being staged in front of Buckingham Palace with an audience of 22,000. Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker joins us in the studio now. And Cameron, a big event tonight. What can we expect from this evening's celebrations?
Yes, the Platinum Party at the Palace, and we're very much hoping that the weather is going to be holding out for that. There were yellow warnings for thunderstorms, but we do understand that that's not expected until midnight tonight, so after the concert's finished. But the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge are expected to pay tributes to Her Majesty the Queen at that concert tonight in front of a crowd of 22,000 people, most of which entered via a public ballot, and are very lucky indeed. We have Queen performing. Adam Lambert, Diana Ross, George Ezra and Sam Ryder, just to name a few. And speaking of Queen, another Queen, Her Majesty, is not expected to attend this evening. She pulled out of the Epsom Derby earlier this afternoon. We know she's been experiencing some mobility problems, and at Trooping the Colour on Thursday, Buckingham Palace has told us that she did experience some discomfort. But all is not lost, because perhaps we might see her at the Jubilee pageants at the end of that tomorrow at Buckingham Palace, but we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you very much, Cameron. We look forward to that, and what a great lineup for tonight. Cameron Walker, thank you. Well, the royal family has wished the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter Lilibet a happy birthday as she turns 1 today. The couple's second child was named in honour of the Queen, who was given the nickname by her grandfather King George V when she was a child. Harry and Meghan are back in the UK for the Jubilee. So far, neither Lilibet nor her older brother Archie have been seen in public at any of the Jubilee celebrations. In other news now, police have carried out a controlled explosion in Trafalgar Square in London. It follows a report from a member of the public of a suspicious vehicle shortly after 9 o'clock this morning. The square was evacuated, and police say the incident is not terrorism-related. Rail passengers in Scotland and the north of England are being warned of significant disruption to services over the bank holiday weekend due to striking workers. Members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union at TransPennine Express have walked out in a long-running dispute over pay. The company is advising people not to travel today or tomorrow with a very limited service in place. Anyone heading to Jubilee celebrations is urged to seek alternative transport. Meanwhile, post office workers are also striking this weekend in a dispute over pay. Staff at some larger branches have walked out. Meanwhile, those working in administration will strike on Monday. Around 3,500 union members are involved in the dispute. In Ukraine, Luhansk governor says Russia has been blowing up bridges across the area's main river to prevent Ukrainians from bringing in military reinforcements. He reports that Ukraine has pushed back Russia's advance in the eastern city of Severodonetsk, taking back around 20% of the city. The Ukrainian official says troops can hold out for up to 2 weeks, despite Moscow deploying reinforcements. Alexandra Matvichuk, head of the Centre for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, told GBNews their resistance protects other nations.
We have to remember that Ukrainians are fighting not only for our freedom, because Russian officials very clearly indicated that Ukraine is only intermediate goals. If he will not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Real Britain with Darren.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, folks, according to a recent YouGov poll, just over a quarter of Brits want to scrap the monarchy. This includes 40% of young people. Many young people may well view a hereditary head of state as an anachronism that belongs to a bygone era. So it got me thinking about my own views, and as ever, they stem from my family. My nana in a house she owned thanks to my granddad's years down the pit, so many years that he could actually no longer fully extend his arm and had respiratory problems for the entire 87 years that he blessed this earth with his presence. In this house, I would sit and look at the dining table, from the dining table, and look up at this absolutely enormous chest of drawers. It felt like the biggest thing I'd ever seen. And on this chest of drawers, alongside various coal-themed ornaments, was row after row of commemorative plates. And now I could recognise Her Majesty the Queen and maybe Princess Diana, but I had absolutely no idea who the other faces painted on these plates were. And it wasn't until later years, because I was completely baffled, frankly, by the fact that my family, a family that had never been to London, that would never know a palace, a luxury or comfort, that would struggle to actually put food on the table and heat the home, why would my family celebrate this one particularly privileged family in Buckingham Palace? And it wasn't until I got older, folks, that I realised that my grandmother kept this hoard of royal memorabilia in a poor part of County Durham, and my grandfather felt that he could go to a faraway place despite never being abroad before in the 50s in the Korean War, because he was fighting under the banner of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. You see, Her Majesty's values were their values. Like my granddad, the Queen knew that friends and family members that had been lost in war, the Queen knew the values of faith, family and friendship were above all others. The Queen knew that there was an understanding that service, that demands sacrifice, that the Union flag's cause of freedom will always prevail. And upon my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and you don't see many of those these days, they received a card from the Queen. And I tell you what, they were really proud to receive that card. And I don't think you'll think this either, I don't think, were it President Blair, President Clegg, President Bercow, were it any of those that had sent them an anniversary note of congrats, do you really believe that my grandparents would have been so proud to receive that card? The monarchy, you see, stands, no matter what your class, as the embodiment of our nation. The crown stands as that ancient symbol of continuity, and actually in people's lives who have faced a lot of economic upheaval. Consider in my granddad's lifetime the closure of the mines, then there was the closure of the steelworks in my patch in County Durham. Suddenly men aren't making things with their hands for work anymore. But I tell you what the one constant was in their lives, the one constant always has been, Her Majesty the Queen. And I think it's pretty damn hard, actually, to overstate how important she's been in people's lives. Our constitutional monarchy is at the very heart of the United Kingdom. Whenever there's a tragedy, whenever there's a war, whenever there's a pandemic, it's Her Majesty that we all look to for comfort. Unlike elected presidencies with all of the baggage of a life in politics attached to them, Her Majesty sits outside of that dirty business, enjoying engagements that an actual interaction with the public that I tell you, doddery old President Biden could only dream of achieving. America's more divided than ever. He is a divisive president. And I think in time, like the young Darren Grimes, the next generation will look up at those shelves of commemorative plates, news items with the Queen, and I think they might come to recognise that in giving up the monarchy, we would be giving up a source of much light and much unity in this country. So, folks, I say, God save the Queen. May she go on and on. God bless you, ma'am. Now, folks, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by my good friend Peter Whittle, who is the writer and director of the New Culture Forum.
Lovely to be here, Darren.
Peter, thank you for your company.
I have to say, by the way, that was very moving, because I was watching you and it was completely sincere. And also, a lot of it actually resonated with my own family. Very ordinary people from London. And, in fact, they were actually then Labour supporters back in the days when that meant you could still be patriotic and Labour. And it resonates. I want to reassure you, though, as well, before we say anything else, and that is you said about a quarter of, according to YouGov, wants to abolish money. That has been the sort of figure for about 50, 60 years.
So you're not worried at all?
Not at all. Basically, I'm not talking about the Queen here, because even Republicans admire the Queen. But the institution, whenever people are asked, it has stayed roughly the same. Around 70 to 75% of people want the institution to remain. Now, that is through the Diana years, that's through all the stuff we've had, ups and downs, whatever. It's one of our values, and you can't just uproot values, as you so nicely put there. And sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but I've been enjoying myself this weekend. I know you've been working very hard. But I'd also say when we went out onto the Mall on Thursday, when it started, I have to say, it was every age there. Families, young families, teenagers, very multicultural a crowd too. And I have to say, I was pleased to see so many young kids who now will, if you like, they will, just like little kids saw Queen Victoria. And that's the whole strength of the monarchy, that there's this continuity. And I have to say, you know, the level of happiness that I've seen around, and indeed celebration, genuine celebration, reminds me much more of the Silver Jubilee than, for example, like the last one. I think it's been a magnificent weekend, and I just hope it carries on like this.
Do you worry, though, because you and I, just to be absolutely frank with viewers, you and I agree on much, Peter.
Yeah.
And I worry that come the next, when Her Majesty the Queen departs this earth, may that not happen for another few decades yet. But when Her Majesty the Queen goes, it's a hereditary process. Prince Charles will take over, coronation, he'll be crowned king. Do you worry that there'll be a much more political figure in office, as acting as the monarch? And actually that could chip away at the magic of monarchy.
I'm not too worried about that, because I don't think Charles is that stupid. I think that the things he has said as Prince of Wales, he knows he can say. I think, apparently, he has got an absolute understanding of the constitutional role of the monarch. I think, of course, there are going to be complications. It's a hard act to follow, 70 years. But I think that you'd be surprised how people transfer their allegiance. You're way too young to remember. But back in the 90s, during the whole Diana years, the monarchy was at a really low ebb. And it wasn't just that it was the monarchy was. The Queen herself lost popularity during that time. It looked really mortal. And you sort of thought, hang on, wait a minute. The idea that somehow we would now be celebrating 70 years and 2022 looked doubtful, but here we are. And I think that basically the Queen's mother was always the big favourite, and everyone said, "Oh, when she's gone, you know, who's going to?" No, actually, it transferred to the Queen herself.
Yeah.
So I think that there will be. I think we shouldn't worry as much as some people are. I think a lot of the time when people worry about Charles and what's going to happen is, I think many of them actually want something to happen.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, they want something to happen. So I think it's been quite remarkable, the level of genuine celebration, as I've said before, you know, in terms of street parties, far greater.
How does this compare then with the 77 Jubilee service that I believe you were at?
I was at, actually.
You are not old enough to be at the 77 service.
Stop it, you flatterer. No. I was 16, and I think what happened, Darren, before we had these big pageants and river pageants and everything, the central thing of the Jubilee was this Thanksgiving service, which we saw yesterday. The Queen couldn't go. But then it was the big thing. So she was in her gold coach. 50 London school children were chosen to go, of which I was one. And I have to say, as they progressed down the aisle, it was like seeing a sort of snapshot, you know, of the 1970s world. I mean, there was Thatcher, she was leader of the opposition. There was Callaghan was the Prime Minister. These figures like Archbishop Makarios of Cyprus. All of these, it was quite extraordinary for a kid of 16. And I remember coming out onto those steps and seeing all these people down Ludgate Circus, and you sort of thought, this is what she sees all the time. I brought it in here. This is like Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah.
Not me, Antique, but I mean, this is... tell me where I should actually put this...
In camera. Which camera?
This one here?
This one, yeah.
Yeah, this is like the... Oh, here we go. This is like the ceremonial order for that day. That's what they all had yesterday.
Yeah. Wow.
But this is 1977. And so I've sort of kept it since then. But as I said to you, Darren, 1977, this feels much more like that in terms of people bothering to get road closures and to have parties and things. Didn't have that so many at the Diamond Jubilee or the Golden Jubilee, but we have had it this time. So there's a recognition of something very, very important.
Do you think that, though, since that 77 service, do you think they have become... And because you mentioned at the start there, you mentioned the Labour Party and how they were once a patriotic party. Do you think there has been a growth in resentment of the British flag, an actual embarrassment maybe to fly, or genuine fear, frankly, to fly the flag, for accusations of being accused of being racist and all these other things?
Look, I mean, how many times have we talked about this, or how has GBNews talked about it? Of course, we've had an extraordinary cultural attack happening, particularly over the past 2 or 3 years. Huge. Everything is racist. Britain is got a shocking imperial slavery past. All of this, right? That has undoubtedly grown. However, what is extraordinary is that for millions of people celebrating this weekend, or even getting together to do a street, organised it a few weeks ago, months ago, they're not even thinking twice about putting up Union Jacks. They're totally they're not inhibited by it. You know, they know this is ridiculous, this is rubbish. But of course, you know, that's a problem for another time now. We've got all of our institutions, you know, they are now full of these people who basically are very, should we say, sceptical about Britain. No getting away from it. But at the same time, 1970s, it's worth remembering this. There was a big Stuff the Jubilee campaign, right? And you'd see the, you know, graffiti and all of that. The Sex Pistols with their nasty song and all of this. None of this this time. I think it's far more unanimous. And so it's filled me with a great deal of optimism. I think you should be optimistic too. But your emotional appeal at the beginning there is one that I think many people will be able to relate to. So,
well, I hope so, Peter. I hope you're right. Peter Whittle there, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Now, folks, coming up on this show today, that was Peter Whittle, the fantastic director of the New Culture Forum, which, by the way, you should check out. But plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. We're going to be discussing the Commonwealth. Is this global family of nations Her Majesty's greatest achievement? But first, folks, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry across northern areas, but there's a risk of thundery showers further south. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, it'll be drier than earlier on in the day for most, but there is still a risk of a thundery and heavy shower through the evening. Across the southeast, for many, it will be dry but quite cloudy. Later on in the evening, there may be heavy showers for some. In the south of Wales, it'll be a mixed picture, feeling warm in any late sunshine, but for many, it'll be cloudy with a risk of showers. Across the Midlands, it'll be a rather cloudy evening. Some may catch a shower, but by and large, it should remain dry until later on in the night, when there is a warning in force. Northeastern England will see the cloud from the North Sea push back in from the coast, so a dull evening, feeling cooler than the day as well. In southern Scotland, there'll be some late sunshine, but some eastern coast could see cloudier skies after a warm day. It'll chill off after dusk here too. Finally, in Northern Ireland, it'll be a fine evening with some sunshine for many areas, a little cooler along the coast, however, with a risk of cloudier skies. For the rest of the evening, heavy and thundery rain will push up from the south, drier further north. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, folks, as you well know at home, Her Majesty the Queen has many, many great achievements, perhaps far too many to list on the show today. But is the Commonwealth Elizabeth II's greatest? She inherited a crumbling empire, of course, but she did devote herself to our imperial brethren. And I actually think the Commonwealth will be one of the family of free nations advancing trade and democracy that she can actually be incredibly proud of. So in this segment, I'm going to be discussing why is the Queen so central to the creation and the maintenance of the Commonwealth of Nations. With me now is the chairman of Global Britain Centre, Aman Singh Bogal. Hi, Aman, and chair of the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, Sunil Sharma. Hello, Sunil. Now, Amal, I'll start with you. Do you think the Commonwealth is actually Her Majesty's greatest achievement? It feels a little bit, you know, there is a hell of a lot to pack into those 70 years and pick one single thing out, isn't there? But the Commonwealth has been so important to Her Majesty.
Yes, indeed. 70 glorious years of this Elizabethan age, from the depredations of war to being the 5th biggest economy today, first monarch to celebrate a platinum jubilee, an icon of harmony and stability. Now, she's the head of state of 15 Commonwealth realms, and she has set the remarkable high bar of public life in duty, service and integrity, a glowing beacon of dignity and unity. And I think that she's the Commonwealth's greatest British role model. She's respected around the world, admired by generations. And the Commonwealth, I think, is Her Majesty's greatest achievement, a free coalition of free nations united by choice in free democracy, free trade and free enterprise, rooted in shared values, shared languages and kinship. The truth is, our Queen is Global Britain, and Global Britain is our Queen. God save the Queen.
Absolutely. Sunil, do you think actually the Commonwealth will survive without Her Majesty the Queen? I was just discussing with my last guest there how Prince Charles actually is much more political than Her Majesty the Queen. Do you worry that actually some members of the Commonwealth may well disagree with some of the perhaps political stances taken by the Prince of Wales over his lifetime?
I think it may be a slight concern in the sense of how well the Queen has managed the last 70 years. You look at what happened during the sort of League of Nations, World War I, World War II, and there was a massive sort of issue in terms of what would happen when we saw so many countries going independent. And now sort of the concerns would be sort of, I know what we're saying Prince Charles in terms of some of his statements he's made, but I think he understands the role when you become the head of the monarchy, that he'll have a massive team around him, and I think he'll have an understanding of what he can and can't say. I think just generally transitioning from the fact that we've had a monarch for 70 years who guided us through a very difficult period in terms of the Commonwealth, where we saw Australia go for a republic independence, and they may come back again. We saw South Africa leaving the Commonwealth and then rejoining later on again. So I think there's always going to be these sort of difficult circumstances that happen throughout history, and I think the Queen has managed that incredibly well. And I think it's not an easy role, and I think Charles will have to, in some ways, follow suit. The likelihood he won't have a monarchy nowhere near as long as the Queen's. So I think he'll be in good stead with a team sort of around him. I think the following him, William, I think we've got almost a perfectly ready-made head of monarch who seems to tick every box that there is alongside his wife. So I think they're in good shape. I do expect there to be the sort of, when we do move from the Queen to Charles, a sort of sentiment again across some Commonwealth countries, should we leave the Commonwealth. But I think it's over-exaggerated, I think, the impact that will have.
Aman, how do you think the Commonwealth actually, and the Queen's role within the Commonwealth, as I said there at the start, in advancing actually trade, in advancing democracy, things that actually the Union Jack stands for, right, and that we should be proud of. Do you actually think the Commonwealth story projects an image of Britain as a soft power superpower?
I think it does, because let's face it, it is an organisation that is unparalleled in history, that has come together of the free will of nations as equals. Every single member of the Commonwealth is an equal, and 15 of them, of course, are realms which Her Majesty is the head of state of. But we also have to realise that this Commonwealth that we have today, 70 years we're celebrating in the Queen's Jubilee, we're also celebrating this year 75 years of the Indian Republic. Now, it is in many ways that a lot of nations that are members of the Commonwealth have run their development course in parallel to the Queen's reign. And we have seen that free democracy, free enterprise, free trade, these are synonyms of global Britain. And the Queen, as our head of state, is very much the figurehead of all of that.
Do you actually think we're going to get an FTA with India then?
Well, the Prime Minister is absolutely ambitious, and so is Prime Minister Modi, that we have it by Diwali to celebrate that festival of prosperity and good over evil, meaning trade over aid, and the fact that it is free enterprise that has lifted 70 Indians out of poverty every single minute. And I think we are very much likely to get that, yes.
Yeah. Sunil, what does the Commonwealth actually mean to you? Because some people will say, oh, Darren, give over, this is an anachronistic organisation, it harks back to empire. actually, do you think there's a really positive story to tell about the Commonwealth?
I think that the Commonwealth, what you said at the sort of top of the segment, I think the Commonwealth is one of the Queen's greatest achievements in how well she's managed it over the last 70 years. The Commonwealth, in terms of on a practical level, pragmatic level, we have the shared history, shared values, shared beliefs, most of these countries are very democratic. So to me, on the purely pragmatic side, I think it makes sense with what's going on in terms of us leaving the European Union, building closer ties to a lot of countries who speak the same language as us, at the same style. We already have lots of crossovers in various different industries. So I think for me personally, I look at it and say, it's a group of countries, shared history, shared values. Yeah. We should be doing more things together, whether it's trade, whether it's human rights, whether it's immigration, there's so many different sides to it. And the likelihood is there'll be lots of countries where we work closer with. You've got Australia, Canada, in terms of the system and the setup. We see it already, where doctors can work in those countries. And, I think there's more that can be done in terms of the industry section. So I think that the Commonwealth is such a underused and undervalued thing that I think sometimes as Brits we often feel more embarrassed about it or ashamed about it than the actual Commonwealth countries. I always have to regularly say in my role that Commonwealth is a voluntary organisation. Everyone there is there by choice, not by force. So I think that's always something that we have to remind people.
It is really, really true, and it is a very different beast from something like the European Union, of course, which is a trade and political they bind themselves into the Brussels monetary union and other things, whereas the Commonwealth, you can come and go. But folks, I think that was a really, really cheery, optimistic way to end that discussion. Chairman of Global Britain Centre, Aman Singh Bogal, thank you very much, and Sunil Sharma, COO at the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. Now, folks, it's time for Grime Watch, the part of the show where we look at what you at home have been saying about the trending topics making the news. Today, flags and patriotism. Obviously, I'm absolutely surrounded by them. On this Jubilee weekend, earlier this week, I took to Twitter to say that it shocks me that there are some flying the pride flag but not the Union Jack. I said, why don't we do away with identity politics and checklists? We're British. There's something to celebrate. If you're gay, straight, bi, black, brown, whatever, you've won the lottery of life if you're born here. And I stand by that. A lot of you responded, mind. Let's see what you had to say. Colin says, some people are put off by flagging the Union Jack or the flag of St George because they're worried about being branded racist. Colin, I agree with you. I was speaking to about that with Peter Whittle earlier in the show, and my view on that is very clear. I think it is utterly ridiculous. That flag, whatever you are, whoever you are, if you are lucky enough to be born under that flag, you are protected in law and wider society. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing, thanks to the sacrifice made by people like my grandfather, generations after generations of British people. Sue said, I couldn't agree more. These days, if you're patriotic in any way, shape or form, you'll be arrested and thrown in jail. The world has gone nuts. Nigel added, being British is nothing to be proud of anymore. Oh, I can honestly say that in my whole life, the Queen has done nothing for me. Well, Nigel, I think given the conversations that we've been having all morning about Britain being the world's soft power superpower, I think many people watching will vehemently disagree with you. Taff said, you should know by now that it's pointless trying to talk sense to the woke left. They would rather the red flag of socialist communist Russia than ours. And that's absolutely true. I think there's a deep-rooted shame amongst a strain of the left that's actually really prevalent in the modern-day Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer's trying to stamp that out and fly in the flag a little bit more. But I think we should be proud. The left used to be proud. You know, it was my granddad's mining generation that used to be proud to fly the flag under the likes of Clement Attlee and others. Where has that gone, folks? Where indeed? You're with GB News, folks, on telly and DAB radio. Next, we'll be bringing you all the news from the Epsom Derby with our reporter, Paul Hawkins. But, folks, now it's time for a check on those news headlines with the lovely Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. It's 2:35. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Princess Anne is at the Epsom Derby as celebrations for the Platinum Jubilee weekend continue. The Princess Royal is representing the Queen at the event. Her Majesty, who's been experiencing some mobility problems, is watching the races on television from Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are visiting Cardiff Castle with their two children. They're meeting performers and crew involved in the Jubilee concert taking place there this afternoon. Well, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge will pay tribute to the Queen this evening, addressing crowds at a Jubilee concert. The open-air show is being staged in front of Buckingham Palace with an audience of 22,000. Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker joins us in the studio now. And Cameron, a big event tonight. What can we expect this evening?
It certainly is the Platinum Party at the Palace. Let's hope the weather holds up. There was some reports that we could have a thunderstorm, but we understand that's not going to happen till about midnight. But Prince Charles and Prince William, we are expecting to pay tributes to Her Majesty the Queen on the stage outside Buckingham Palace this evening in front of a crowd of around 22,000 people, most of which entered a public ballot in order to secure a ticket. We have Queen performing, Adam Lambert, Diana Ross, George Ezra and Sam Ryder, the Eurovision runner-up, just to name a few people performing this evening. But Her Majesty the Queen, we understand, will not be attending. She pulled out of the Epsom Derby this afternoon. We understand she's experiencing some mobility issues at Trooping the Colour on Thursday. Buckingham Palace has told us she experienced some discomfort. But all is not lost, because we understand that tomorrow, after the Jubilee pageant, we may well see another balcony appearance from Her Majesty the Queen. So perhaps another appearance from her.
OK, Cameron, thank you very much for that. Well, let's hope the weather holds out for tonight. And what a great lineup. We'll, of course, keep you up to date on all the Jubilee celebrations across the weekend. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be back to Real Britain with Darren in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, if you have been watching, you'll have heard that members of the royal family are attending Platinum Jubilee celebrations across the United Kingdom today. But the Queen, sadly, has missed her second event of the weekend. She'll be watching from her telly at Windsor Castle instead. She's pulled out of the Epsom Derby due to mobility issues. The event, held in Surrey on the first Saturday of June each year, is known as Britain's richest flat horse race and one of the most prestigious. She loves it, Her Majesty the Queen. But we'll head over to Epsom now and find out what's going on. Joining me from the Derby is GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins. Hiya, Paul. Thank you for your company. Now, Paul, what does this particular event actually mean to the Queen? Why is it so important to her?
Well, there are a number of reasons, Darren. First of all, we know she loves horses. You heard that equine reference in the Thanksgiving service yesterday at St Paul's Cathedral. So, you know, that made it even more clear that the Queen horses have been a big part of the Queen's life since she was born. But particularly why Epsom, the Derby, means so much to her is that there are 5 classic flat races in the country. Her horses have won all of them, except the Derby. So the closest she came was in 1953, 4 days after her coronation. Her horse came second. That's the closest she's come to winning the Derby, so it means a lot to her. It's why she has come pretty much every year she can, and only on 2 occasions outside the pandemic, in 1956 and 1984, she hasn't made the Derby, so it means a hell of a lot to her. It's why she made this race one of the official occasions as part of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and it means a lot to her. And she, you know, if she can't make it today, then she really can't make it, because she would pull out all the stops to try and be here. So instead, Princess Anne is here. She arrived, as they do, in the royal carriage, driving up the racecourse, and then she made her way up to the royal box to a lot of cheers from the crowd. And then we've already had 1 race underway today, and there's a few more to come. There's 7 in total today, and the Derby takes place at 4:30 when Her Majesty, well, I was going to say when she'll be watching it on TV. I'm sure she's watching all the coverage on the TV at the moment.
Absolutely, and of course the Royal Princess Anne has a love affair with horses to match her mother's, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, the royal family in general, very, very close to horses, horse racing, breeding. You know, Princess Anne, she's represented the country, she's represented Great Britain before, so yeah, very much into her horses as well. And, OK, people here, you know, they love to see the Queen. They do understand, you know, she is of an age where she needs to take things easy. She has to pick and choose the events that she goes to, and they're still here to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee, and indeed the weather's also improved, because this morning there were a lot of very miserable looking faces staring out of windows thinking, what's today going to be like? The grey clouds have cleared away, the rain's gone, it's dried out a lot, and the sunshine's come out. And there are people here, not just from in the UK, but all around the world. In fact, also here is Kinsey Schofield, who needs very little introduction to our audience. Kinsey, often talking to us about entertainment from LA, but you're here in the UK today. Why is that?
Oh, I just love the Queen. I wanted to celebrate with you, and I think it's truly going to be one of our last times to come together, unite, and thank her in celebration for her life, her entire life of selflessness and service to others.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Queen is one of the most famous women in the world. She's influential, she's much loved, but for you personally, why that? Not just because she's the Queen. What else is it about her?
Can I be honest with you? I'm from Los Angeles, a very shallow part of the world where reality stars run the show. The Queen is elegance, she is graceful, she is sophistication, and she has lived her life serving others, which is something that you so rarely see. So I want to be here and I want to celebrate somebody who has earned it.
Yeah. More so, would you say, than other members of the royal family? The Queen, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not sure about the royal family. The Queen just seems to everyone loves the Queen.
Oh, absolutely. But also Princess Anne, one of the hardest working royals in the royal family. So at least if we're not going to get the Queen today, we get the Princess Royal. Yeah, yeah. And what do you have you been to, I don't know if you go to a lot of horse race meets. How does this compare to ones in the UK? I do. I just want to prove it. I have a purse that I carry when I go there.
How did I miss that? I don't know how that's a handbag.
This is my handbag, so I came prepared. This one I think it feels like in America we're trying to be like an event like this. It feels like we're dressing up in costume, where here it feels like I'm around people that this is their these outfits are already in their closet. They're not combing the internet trying to look like an aristocrat. So it's exciting because it feels more authentic.
Yeah, and you're going to be at the palace tomorrow for the procession, are you?
I'm not sure yet. You know, I haven't slept in a few days, so I might be unconscious, if I'm being honest with you.
Fair enough. On that note, we'll leave it then. Kinsey, thank you so much for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. How did I miss the horse head handbag? I will never know. One interesting thing to note, by the way, Darren, we've had one race here today. Something really unusual happened. I don't know much about horse racing myself, but one of the horses left the stalls without a rider on it, and that's really unusual. He left without a jockey on it. And when they went back to look at the footage, the horse in the stall next to the basically one horse headbutted the rider of another horse next to him. The rider was concussed, and his horse left and took off down the race with the rider still holding on to the stalls at the side. And we had this spectacle of a horse taking part in the race without a rider. It was really unusual. Apparently a lot of people here have never seen anything like it before. So a bit of controversy in the first race. We'll find out what happens, of course, in the Derby, which takes place at 4:30 today.
Perfect. GB News' very own Paul Hawkins there with a horsehead handbag. I've never seen one of those before. From the royal expert, Kinsey Schofield. Thank you very much. Now, folks, it's 2:46 and it's time for our Scrap Reform Keep segment. The Crown Prosecution Service finds itself in a spot of controversy. It's created a new position called a Speak Out Champion, and it's appointed a transgender activist and former sports photographer in that role. She's been criticised for posting derogatory tweets about women and so-called TERFs, which is people who believe in biological sex to you and I, as well as calling for the word woman to be replaced altogether. Sophie Cook will supposedly work to improve confidence amongst employees at the CPS to speak openly about their experiences. I wonder, folks, I wonder if that will include women who don't believe in this gender ideology. And what's more, what's really important here, will the CPS be able to remain politically neutral when it's choosing who to go after with controversial political campaigners embedded in the very upper echelons of that organisation? Well, joining me to discuss this is the founder and director of Transgender Trend, Stephanie Davies-Arai. Stephanie, thank you very much for your company. How do you feel about this appointment? Do you agree with me that actually I'm thinking, hang on, what's going to happen here?
Well, Sophie Cook doesn't exactly support women speaking out. And the CPS have not learned their lesson. They produced hate crime schools guidance back in 2017 originally, republished it in 2020. That was challenged in the courts by a 14-year-old girl because it was written with Gendered Intelligence and Stonewall, two trans activist groups. And although the judicial review didn't go ahead, they then withdrew that hate crime guidance permanently, and it was brought to court on the issues of discrimination against girls. And so the guidance was full of gaslighting, basically, of girls and suggesting to them that they may get a criminal conviction if they complained about a boy being in their toilets or changing rooms. It was, it was very biased guidance. And now they've appointed a very prominent trans activist who shares the views of Gendered Intelligence and Stonewall to be their speak out champion.
Yeah, I mean, Stephanie, it strikes me, you mentioned Stonewall there. In my lifetime, I'm not very old, I promise you, in my lifetime I would have supported Stonewall. I would have said that the aims and objectives of an equality-seeking organisation is a very laudable one for equality in law and wider society. But as far as I'm concerned, now it's a bit like St George in retirement. He slayed the dragon, and now they're just trying to find new ways to keep the donations coming in. And this is the one issue that they've latched onto. And it just so happens that this one issue, they're saying because of a very vocal, tiny, tiny minority, women's rights have to go out the window. I think it's an absolute outrage.
Stonewall used to be an excellent organisation supporting the rights of lesbian, gay and bisexual people. And since they included transgender in 2015, they've become a trans rights organisation based on this concept of gender identity. So it's trying to replace sex with gender identity in legislation and public policy as the distinction between men and women. And of course, that has a huge impact on women's rights. Sophie Cook supports male athletes in women's sports, for example. Sophie Cook has said that why should a 14-year-old girl should be fine with sharing a shower in a changing room with a male athlete. All of those sex-based rights of women are based on the Equality Act definition of women as female under the protected characteristic sex. So gender identity isn't a protected characteristic. It's and it's not in our law. It doesn't exist in our laws. And yet these organisations and activists are promoting the idea of gender identity as the distinction between men and women, and not sex.
Stephanie, this is exactly why I oppose the painting of police cars and taking these positions on really quite politically contentious issues, like for the reasons that you've just mentioned very eloquently there. I just think that the police need to keep activism and politics out of law and order. But that's my view, and the view you heard before that was the founder and director of Transgender Trend, Stephanie Davies-O'Reilly there. Thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, back to that topic that I started the show on. A greater number of 18 to 24-year-olds want an elected head of state rather than a monarchy. A poll last year actually found those results. It was YouGov data from a 2021 poll, which suggested that 41% of 18 to 24-year-olds should say we should have an elected head of state. Only 31% would like to see the monarchy continue. So how do we actually convince a generation of young people that a constitutional monarchy is the best option for Blighty? Well, joining me is Commonwealth Youth Leader Afzal Pervez and Newcastle University student Adam Wildsmith. Adam, what does the monarchy mean to you then?
Well, I think clearly this weekend shown that the Queen's probably the greatest Briton of all time. I think she's steadfast, reliable, committed. You know, those majestic scenes on Thursday, the Trooping of the Colour, that Flypast at Buckingham Palace, it really shows that the Queen's dedicated her whole life to the country. And I don't really see what the alternative would be. Would we have an elected head of state? We saw how that's gone in the US, for example. The last two presidents haven't exactly been competent. And then we look at our own government. Are they competent? What would we want? President Boris Johnson? I think the Queen has really shown that an elected head of state, a reserved head of state, really is the best way to go.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Afzal, what's your view?
Well, I have to agree with Adam. I think we've seen this past weekend that we have all united as a nation, regardless of our political views, around the monarch and around the royal family. And I think we've seen with the cost of living crisis, with Brexit, with COVID-19, the Partygate, for example, everyone's had problems with politicians, but we've all come together to celebrate the common good and the common values we have that are embodied by Her Majesty the Queen.
Yeah, so how then do we, because you used to champion that pretty pro-monarchy stance there, how do we convince your peers, for example, that actually an elected head of state would be more divisive, in my opinion? It would actually, I think, shatter the strength of unity and force of feeling behind the head of state. You know, at times of crisis, if we consider the COVID-19 pandemic, the Queen, given her message about, you know, we will all, that Dame Vera Lynn quote that she gave there, really brought us all together. I think, Adam, you're right, that we wouldn't get that from, say, a President Blair, a President Bercow. Imagine that. It's enough to make me shudder, I tell you that much. But, Adam, how do you convince your peers, then, that actually, you know, the Queen is where it's at?
Well, of course, that poll was taken a year ago, as you mentioned. It would be interesting to see a poll of young people, perhaps after this Platinum Jubilee weekend, to see if there's perhaps any more enthusiasm for the royal family. But I think young people are perhaps naturally rebellious. They perhaps would favour change. But I think if you actually had a sort of national debate, a national argument over this, I think the monarchy would triumph. And I think if you look at the Queen's actions over the last 70 years and this weekend, I think she really has cemented the monarchy, at least in Britain, for the next 100 years to come. I think there are challenges in perhaps Commonwealth realms. You see Australia, Jamaica, they're moving towards republicanism. But I think in Britain, at least, I think the monarchy is safe for at least the next century to come.
Afzal, we're just coming to the end of this discussion, the end of this hour. I wonder if you can set out, do you think actually the monarchy is going to be in real trouble when it comes to Prince Charles, for example? Because as Adam says there, the strength of feeling behind Her Majesty the Queen, all well and good. She's done an absolutely fantastic job over the last 70 years. But do you think as soon as Charles gets into position, knowing actually that he's taken political stances in the past, are you worried that that will be where we start to hear more Republican sentiment in Britain?
I mean, naturally, I'm worried. And as any monarchist or someone who supports stability and tradition and values in this country will be worried. But I think we have to give Prince Charles a chance. He was woke before woke was fashionable. He is, we know he's going to, downsize the monarchy. He's pro-environment, human rights and civil rights, etc.
Absolutely, Afzal. We're going to have to end it there, sadly. But I think you're right. I think he'll manage to turn things around and take it seriously. But that was Afzal Pervez, a student at the University of Newcastle, and Adam Wildsmith. You're watching Real Britain, folks, with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Let's go to the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry across northern areas, but there's a risk of thundery showers further south. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, it'll be drier than earlier on in the day for most, but there is still a risk of a thundery and heavy shower through the evening. Across the southeast, for many, it will be dry but quite cloudy. Later on in the evening, there may be heavy showers for some. In the south of Wales, it'll be a mixed picture, feeling warm in any late sunshine, but for many, it'll be cloudy with a risk of showers. Across the Midlands, it'll be a rather cloudy evening. Some may catch a shower, but by and large, it should remain dry until later on in the night, when there is a warning in force. Northeastern England will see the cloud from the North Sea push back in from the coast, so a dull evening, feeling cooler than the day as well. In southern Scotland, there'll be some late sunshine, but some eastern coast could see cloudier skies after a warm day. It'll chill off after dusk here too. Finally, in Northern Ireland, it'll be a fine evening with some sunshine for many areas, a little cooler along the coast, however, with a risk of cloudier skies. For the rest of the evening, heavy and thundery rain will push up from the south, drier further north. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me. Noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is the second hour of Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. And hey, what a cracking show we've got lined up for you today. It's absolutely packed fuller than Britain's airports during this summer travel nightmare. Now, without the nightmare part, although mind you, we have got one nightmare element coming up with a debate with a representative from Animal Rebellion, the wanting Jubilee celebration wreckers. We'll also have an RAF Red Arrows pilot. We'll have Dr. Anna Whitelock, Director of the Centre for the Study of Modern Monarchy, and Peter Bone, who goes out to bat for Boris. But first, here's the news with Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Princess Anne is attending the Epsom Derby as celebrations for the Platinum Jubilee weekend continue. The Princess Royal is representing the Queen at the event. Her Majesty, who's been experiencing some mobility problems, is watching the races on television from Windsor Castle. Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has today praised the Queen's dedication to public service.
I think what it shows you is the true sort of core value of the British people, which is coming together, contributing, wanting to acknowledge and thank the Queen for what's been an incredible 70 years. Vast majority of people were there, lining the streets, just in thanks for the Queen, to show what the Queen means to them. And that was fantastic to see. All along the streets, people had come to London to celebrate and say thank you to the Queen, and that was fantastic.
40 of the Queen's jockeys, past and present, lined up in a guard of honour for the royal party ahead of the races on Derby Day. Former jockey Dale Gibson told GB News the Derby is one of the most important races in the world.
We go back generations through history. Horses are bred to try and get a mile and a half in their 3-year-old career to come to the Epsom Derby. So if you've got a well-bred colt, you're hoping that it can stay the trip, and that's what you're looking for as an owner-breeder. So it's a big day in the racing calendar, a big day in the British sporting calendar as well. Not every horse can get here, not every horse makes it here, not every horse is good enough to be here.
Prince George and Princess Charlotte have made a surprise Jubilee visit to Wales. They joined their parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, at Cardiff Castle to meet performers and crew involved in the Jubilee concert taking place there this afternoon. It was the siblings' first official visit to Wales. Separately, the Earl and Countess of Wessex visited Northern Ireland as part of the festivities. The royal couple joined members of the public at a 1950s-themed event. They also watched a community dance group perform a routine celebrating the last 7 decades. Well, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge will pay tribute to the Queen this evening, addressing crowds at a Jubilee concert. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker told us the open-air show is being staged in front of Buckingham Palace with an audience of 22,000.
The Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge are expected to pay tributes to Her Majesty the Queen at that concert tonight in front of a crowd of 22,000 people, most of which entered via a public ballot, and I'm very lucky indeed. We have Queen performing, Adam Lambert, Diana Ross, George Ezra and Sam Ryder, just to name a few. And speaking of Queen, another Queen, Her Majesty, is not expected to attend this evening. She pulled out of the Epsom Derby earlier this afternoon. We know she's been experiencing some mobility problems and at Trooping the Colour on Thursday.
GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker there. To other news now. Detectives have named a man who died after being stabbed at a party in East London. Lamar Jackson, reportedly known as the rapper Hypo, died after being stabbed at an event in Woodford yesterday. Emergency services received calls saying a fight had broken out at the venue. Mr. Jackson was pronounced dead at the scene. No arrests have yet been made. Rail passengers in Scotland and the north of England are being warned of significant disruption to services over the bank holiday weekend due to striking workers. Members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union at Trans-Pennine Express have walked out in a long-running dispute over pay. The company is advising people not to travel today or tomorrow with a limited service in place. And anyone heading to Jubilee celebrations is urged to seek alternative transport. Meanwhile, post office workers are also striking this weekend in a dispute over pay. Staff at some larger branches have walked out. Meanwhile, those working in administration will strike on Monday. Around 3,500 union members are involved in the dispute. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Real Britain with Darren.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. We're going to kick off by debating, will Boris Johnson survive this Partygate nonsense and fight the next general election? He's determined to, but many now think that there is inevitably going to be a no-confidence vote in his leadership. I'll also clash with this animal rebellion outfit, the radical left-wing group that have tried to sabotage the beginning of these most important Jubilee celebrations. Who the hell do they think they are? And the real Top Gun. I'll speak to an RAF Red Arrows pilot about the magnificent flyby and what it's like jetting around in the world actually, greatest precision flying unit. That's what we'll be talking about for the next hour. But as ever, folks, I would absolutely love to know your thoughts. Much more important than my big gob. Tweet me at GB News, or you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. Watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. Loads of brilliant content on our GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, folks, according to a recent YouGov poll, just over a quarter of Brits want to scrap the monarchy. This includes 40% of young people. Now, many young people may well view a hereditary head of state as an anachronism that belongs to a bygone era. It got me thinking about my own views, and as ever, my views stem and are informed by my family. My nana, you see, she lives in a house that they own thanks to my grandfather's years down the pit. So many years that he could no longer fully extend his arm and had respiratory problems for the entire 87 years that he blessed the earth with his presence. In this house, I would sit at the dining table and I would look up at this enormous black wood chest of drawers. And on this chest of drawers, alongside various coal-themed ornaments, there was row after row of commemorative royal plates. Now, I could recognise Her Majesty the Queen, of course, and I could recognise Princess Diana, but I had no idea who the other faces painted on these plates actually were. In later years, it baffled me to think that this family, a family that had never even been to London, that would never know luxury palaces and comfort, that would struggle to feed their kids and heat their home, why would this household celebrate this one particularly privileged family? It really got me thinking. But as I got older, I realised that the reason that my grandmother kept this hoard of royal memorabilia in a poor part of County Durham, the reason is simple. The reason my grandfather felt that he could go away to a faraway place, despite never being abroad before, in the 1950s, in the Korean War, was because he was fighting under the banner of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, not of number 10 Downing Street. Her Majesty's values, you see, were their values. Like my grandfather, the Queen and her father knew people they'd lost in the war. They knew of the values of faith, of family, of friendship. They spoke to both families despite the economic difference between the two. They had an understanding of how service demands sacrifice and how the Union flag's cause of freedom will always ultimately prevail. Upon my granddad's 50th and grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and you don't see many of those about these days, they received a card from the Queen. And they were really proud, actually, I can remember it vividly, to receive that card. Do you honestly believe, would any Republican be able to tell me that they'd have been so proud were it President Blair, President Clegg or President Bercow, which was enough to make me shudder, I tell you that much, if they had penned an anniversary note of congratulations? The monarchy, you see, stands, no matter what your class, as the embodiment of our nation. The crown stands as that ancient symbol of continuity. And actually, in people's lives who have faced a lot of economic upheaval, considering my granddad's lifetime in my patch of County Durham, the closure of the mines, then there was the closure of the steelworks, and all of a sudden, you've got men no longer making things with their hands for work. But the one constant, the one thing that hasn't changed in people's lives, has always been Her Majesty the Queen. And I think it's hard. I think it's really, really difficult to overstate how important she has been in people's lives. Our constitutional monarchy is at the very heart of the United Kingdom. Whenever there's a tragedy, a pandemic, a war, it's Her Majesty that we look to for comfort. Unlike elected presidencies with all the baggage of a life in politics attached to their time in office, Her Majesty sits out of that dirty business, enjoying engagement that doddery old President Biden could only dream of achieving. In time, like the young Darren Grimes looking up at the shelves of commemorative plates, I think the next generation will come to recognise that in giving up the monarchy, we would be giving up a source of much light and much unity in this country. So, folks, I say loud and proud, God save the Queen, may she go on and on. God bless you, ma'am. Now, folks, as I said at the top of the show there, the levels of Tory dissatisfaction with Boris Johnson seem to be growing, at least within the parliamentary party, following the publication of the Sue Gray report last week. The Prime Minister has said in recent days that it would be irresponsible for him to resign over Partygate, as the UK faces major challenges, like, of course, this generation-defining cost-of-living crisis. He actually told Mumsnet, the forum, that he was still here because we've got huge pressures economically. It's quite a claim, of course, isn't it? Because actually, some critics are arguing he's partly responsible for those economic woes. Is that fair? More than 45 Tory MPs have publicly questioned his fitness to hold office, and some now say a vote of no confidence is all but inevitable. So, can he survive? Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Peter Bone, and former Labour MP and CEO of PLMR, Kevin Craig. Kevin, can I start with you? The Prime Minister's right, isn't he, that now isn't the time. You've got war at Ukraine and you've got this generation-defining cost-of-living crisis. It would be reckless to change the top dog at this moment.
Oh, Darren, thank you. Just to correct, I'm a former parliamentary candidate and councillor, but not a former MP. I don't think it would be reckless, Darren, and I've just come from a wonderful party for the Queen's Jubilee, and lots of my Brexit voting neighbours, we don't share the same politics, but we're great friends. They've lost belief in the man that they were passionate to elect. And I'm not sure that anybody knows what the Boris Johnson Prime Ministership is for anymore. And when you have a crowd at a royal event booing the Prime Minister of the day, these are not radical revolutionaries. These are British people that believe in integrity and honesty and good work in public office, the sorts of things, actually, I believe that Peter Bone believes in. And I think the Prime Minister is hull below the waterline, to be honest, Darren. I don't see any way back, because all right, I just don't see it. His own side is too upset, not the opposition.
Well, Kevin, the BBC also made that claim about Boris being booed at St Paul's yesterday, but I actually heard cheering too. I just want to play the clip just so my viewers and listeners can decide. We got that clip? Now, Peter, that to me, I heard a few wolf whistles there. That's hardly a boo.
What? Darren!
It wasn't exclusively booing, was it, Peter?
No, it wasn't. And it depends which view you take of the Prime Minister, whether you think people were cheering or booing him on that occasion. I'm old enough to remember when Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister. She would often be booed by people who didn't like her. But she was the best Prime Minister in my lifetime, and therefore I understand that the same people cheered the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Well, if you're cheering the Mayor of London, your views are pretty clear there. So I don't believe that. I think it's a story about nothing. I didn't hear anything in particular either way, to be honest.
But do you accept Kevin's comments there that actually within your Tory colleagues, there are actually more and more members of Parliament saying enough is enough?
No, I don't agree with that. The Conservative Party is such a broad church that whenever a new leader is elected, immediately somebody puts in a letter to the chairman of the 1922 committee because they don't want him or her. And the matter is there's 360 odd of us, and I'm sure there's 30 or 40 that don't like the Prime Minister. In fact, I know there's 30 or 40 that don't like the Prime Minister, never liked the Prime Minister, want to get rid of him. And of course they think Partygate is a method to do that. And then they can try and install somebody who will try and undo Brexit, stop the immigration policy and things like that. So it's not a sort of new situation. What is strange is the fact that there are many parts of the media who are overhyping this. And if there is a vote of no confidence, and I'm not sure there will be, if there is, I'm sure Boris will win it and carry on.
On that
that's what
point,
my constituents want him anyway. That's what I'm sure.
Kevin, on that point then, as Peter says, I don't think you can discount Boris Johnson far too easily, because look at the way in which they said he wouldn't win as London Mayor, they said he wouldn't win a Brexit, they said that he wouldn't win the general election. Time and time again, he's proved people wrong, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think it's important to be fair, Darren, and I will be, that Boris Johnson has enjoyed a remarkable career in politics, as you say, pulling off big wins. But here's the deal. He only became Prime Minister because he opportunistically saw a chance to take a view on Brexit that would unseat Theresa May. I mean, we won't get into that now. And I think respect Brexit. The British people voted for it. It can't be undone. I didn't, but it must be respected. But Boris went for it because he saw a way to get Theresa out of the way, because he thought he'd be a better, more charismatic PM. And I think, I agree with you. I'm not going to underestimate the guy. But the truth is, the election numbers are not looking good. And the Conservative Party, as Peter knows better than us, is a very ruthless election-winning machine. And the numbers do not look good. The polling doesn't look good. You've got two big by-elections. Are you telling me that if he loses in Tiverton that there won't be more panic? I believe from talking to people, in the Tory party and more broadly in Westminster, that there is genuine concern for the fortunes of the party. And what is a Boris? Let's ask Peter. What's a Boris Johnson premiership for? What's it for?
Hey, Kevin, I'm sat in the chair here, but yes, Peter, I will let you answer that question.
Oh, well, it strikes me that the Prime Minister is the person to get the big calls right. He got Brexit done when people said Brexit was impossible to do. He got the first vaccination in Europe to protect us from COVID. Of course, we couldn't have done that if we'd been in the EU. He did the furlough scheme protecting people during COVID. He got the boosters scheme so we didn't get COVID back again. He's led Europe's response to the dreadful war in Europe. He's tackling the illegal migration problem. That's what Boris is about, getting the big calls right. And now he's got to deal with the cost of living. And the fact that we are, 6 points on average behind in the opinion polls mid-term, if Labour was going to be the next government, they would be 20 points ahead. And the fact that the last local elections north of Watford in England, the Conservatives gained seats over Labour. And if we lose to a by-elections in mid-term, that's hardly surprising. I'm not saying we will. I hope we will win in both of those. But the idea that there is some panic, there's some wholesale switch to Labour is just patently untrue. And I think Boris will lead us into the next election and we'll win it.
Kevin, you've got 10 seconds to come back to that.
I mean, Boris... Sorry, Darren. Boris Johnson. I'd love to see Boris Johnson against Keir Starmer in the next general election. All right? I'd love to see that. Two different leaders. One full of integrity would resign if he got a fixed penalty notice. The other, who seems to ride roughshod over the rules and regulations, got no grasp of detail, and it's not Labour people, business people, or former politicians like me saying that Boris is in trouble. It's Conservatives. The Conservative Party, I've got many good friends in the Conservative Party. It's a party about honesty, integrity, and Boris doesn't tell the truth. And on the big calls, anybody who's Prime Minister, all of the last 5, it's the least you expect to lead us in the Ukraine conflict. He doesn't get any points for that. That was basic.
Well, I mean, he has done a pretty good job. A lot of the British people are saying, well done, Boris, and support his stance.
As am I.
But there we are. We'll have to leave it there. That was the Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Peter Bourne, and the former parliamentary councillor and CEO of PLMR, Kevin Craig. Thank you very much for your time. Folks, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, I'm going to be speaking to Animal Rebellion, linked to Extinction Rebellion. Who on earth do they think they are? That means that they have the right to try and sabotage the beginning of these Jubilee celebrations. I'm going to find out. But first, here's the weather.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, folks, 2 days ago, as this nation united to kick off the Jubilee celebrations, one left-wing group chose to attempt to sabotage the event outside of Buckingham Palace and turn attention to themselves by lying down in front of the marching soldiers. The crowds, unsurprisingly, booed. The group was called Animal Rebellion, who, despite lots of evidence to the contrary, claim livestock farming is harming the planet and want to see animals given similar rights to human beings. One of the demonstrators, according to the Mail, was a former plane airline pilot who summed up their methods as doing stupid, I won't finish that word, like this and facing a prison sentence. How lovely and how democratic, eh? The Met have confirmed that 12 arrests have been made of those who attempted to enter the ceremonial route on the Mall, and they have been arrested. But with me now is the spokesperson for Animal Rebellion, Robert Gordon. Robert, can I just start by asking you that most fundamental of questions? What makes you think you've got the right to disrupt a day that is so important to millions of people in this country who are watching the armed forces and feel immense pride at what the armed forces are actually marching in the name of?
Yeah, well, we were there on Thursday, not to ruin anyone's day, not to ruin the celebrations, but to draw really important awareness to the climate and environmental crises that we face. And as you say, we're drawing attention to the fact that animal farming is one of the biggest contributors to this crisis, where we see 80% of farmed land, all farmed land, goes towards producing animals for meat and dairy, when they produce only less than 20% of the calories that we eat. So we've got this incredible inefficiency, and we're celebrating this billion-dollar jubilee whilst people are unable to feed themselves and relying on food banks in the UK. So we think that's a crime, and we'd like to see a transition to a plant-based food system. This is our solution, where people don't go hungry, where the environment isn't destroyed.
How much farmland and trees being chopped down and all of the rest of it are being made in the name of putting up these solar panel farms that I'm assuming you're in favour of as well?
Well, what I can tell you is that the majority of deforested land is a result of growing crops to feed animals in factory farms, many of which are in the UK. You know, when we kill more than 1 billion animals each year in the UK, that requires a significant amount of land to feed them. So we're saying, give that land just to crops, don't inefficiently cycle it through animals, and you free up a significant amount of land, up to 76% of the land that we use for farming.
So how much
and
land
you can plant trees on that. You can put solar panels on that instead.
How much land would we actually need then to move to a plant-based diet?
Well, we need 76% land is what the scientists are telling us, that if you transition to a plant-based food system, you use 76% less land, which is more space than the whole of Australia, the United States and England.
Right, well, I think that's a little bit Panglossian, that figure. But if you actually believe the stats, and I don't doubt that you are sincere and genuine in what you say, why don't you actually stand for political office, actually try and get yourself elected on this ticket of basically outlawing, I'm assuming that's what you want to do, the sale of these meats to the British people?
Well, you know what? We've tried writing to our MPs, we've tried writing these petitions. The reality is...
No, that's not what I'm saying. Stand for office yourself. Yeah. Get the British people. Put yourself on the line there and say, I am actually putting myself at the mercy of the ballot box. You can vote for me, you can vote for my platform to get rid of meat, to eradicate the menace of the killing of animals for food. Why don't you actually do that? And then people might have a little bit more respect for what you're doing.
I have no doubt that many people within our group, including myself, are standing for office next time or have stood before. You know, we've got councillors with us, we've got doctors, scientists, and we are pursuing every avenue we can. And the reality is, we've seen in the past that putting our liberty on the line and going out and causing this disruption, however unpleasant it might be for a short while, it achieves the change that we need. And that change is to transition to a plant-based future, rewild the land that we free up, and ensure that we have a livable future for years to come. And that's a future that's in jeopardy right now, and that we're being told if we don't act now in the next 2 to 3 years and pursue these urgent transformative changes, then we won't be able to survive.
Right, and I've heard that one before, but the capitalism point, you actually argue, correct me if I'm wrong, that capitalism is the root cause of much of our problems.
I'm not sure where you necessarily saw that.
It's in an op-ed that your outfit wrote.
Okay, I've not read that particular op-ed, but our message for this action was really clear, that we need to reclaim royal land, that they're the largest landowners in the UK, and they have a responsibility to, instead of using this land for meat and dairy farming, which we know is bad for the environment, and blood sports like hunting and shooting, they could help their farmers transition to a plant-based food production.
Right.
And rewild the freed up land, plant trees.
Yeah, you've said
and
that.
absorb carbon from the atmosphere.
If capitalism is the problem, though, and the profit motive is the problem, which is what's said, it being responsible for environmental issues, can you tell me which economy around the world that doesn't value the profit motive, so a communist country or a socialist country, which country around the world has adopted a fully vegan diet? Because I don't know about you, but I struggle to see Kim Jong-un in North Korea living on a diet of quinoa salads. And I really, really struggle to find any historic evidence that the Soviet Union, for example, was especially kind to the environment. They had other priorities, Robert, like not starving to death.
Of course, and there's no one single problem. That's why we need a whole range of solutions. And certainly, I'm sure capitalism isn't the only problem. I've outlined the problem today, and what we're doing is we're coming in and we're saying that we don't just have a problem. It's not all doom and gloom. We're coming with a solution that the scientists around the world are recommending, and showing that we can ensure a livable future by transitioning to a plant-based food system.
Well,
whether that's in a capitalist economy or otherwise.
OK, so why should people, though, watching this agree with your outfit and think, right, I'll get behind you guys, I think you are doing great stuff? Why would they do that when you can't even agree with each other? As I say, that was in that op-ed that I've just read this morning, went through it till my heart's content in the Bristol Post it was, to find out why you guys are protesting today. And actually, given that this nation is featuring generation-defining cost of living crises, would what you're advocating not actually make us poorer, not actually make us colder, and actually the British people should give you lot very short shrift?
Well, the cost of living crisis that we're facing is in part as a result of the system of food production within which we live, where you have a significant energy-intensive industrialized farming system where barrels of oil go into producing food. So if we transition to plant-based farming, we free up this land, you know, it's less energy intensive.
OK, Robert Gordon, I'm sorry, but
food, you can feed everyone.
Robert, I'm going to have to stop you there.
The cost of living crisis.
I'm going to have to stop you there because I'm afraid that I find that risible nonsense. I really, really, really do. The cost of living crisis, people in the supermarkets struggling to actually get to the till point and pay for what it is that they're buying, picking up these vegan goods exclusively, being prohibited from farmers doing business on the market is not going to improve the cost of living crisis. I really, really think that that's disingenuous. But Animal Rebellion spokesperson Robert Gordon, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, I'm going to be speaking to renowned royal historian Anna Whitelock, hopefully a little bit more sound than the last conversation I've had. She's going to be speaking about past Jubilees and how this weekend is going to go down in the history books. But now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. It's 3:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Princess Anne is representing the Queen at the Epsom Derby as celebrations for the Platinum Jubilee weekend continue. Her Majesty, who's been experiencing some mobility problems, is watching the races on television from Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, Prince George and Princess Charlotte have made a surprise first official visit to Wales. They joined their parents at Cardiff Castle to meet performers and crew involved in the Jubilee concert taking place there this afternoon. Separately, the Earl and Countess of Wessex visited Northern Ireland as part of the festivities. The royal couple joined members of the public at a 1950s theme event. They also watched a community dance group perform a routine celebrating the last 7 decades. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be back to Real Britain with Darren in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Now, how does this Platinum Jubilee compare to past Jubilees? And how will this weekend actually go down in history? Well, I've got one of the Jubilee's on the Jubilee's official website. The origins of a Jubilee, it says, actually go back as far as the Pharaohs, some 3,000 years ago before Christ. Pretty incredible stuff. But joining me now is Dr. Anna Whitelock, the historian and director of the Centre for the Study of Modern Monarchy, to actually shine some light on that for us. Anna, thank you very much for your company. Now, could you actually start by actually giving us your view, your take on how this Platinum Jubilee will be seen by the history books in the not-too-distant future?
Well, quite simply, it is a record-breaking event. There has not been a Platinum Jubilee in British history before. No monarch has reigned for 70 years before. So, you know, we can think of Queen Elizabeth I, we can think of Queen Victoria, we can think of Henry VIII, these big names in British history. None of them have surpassed 70 years. So Queen Elizabeth II will go down in the history books and be studied for, you know, centuries to come as a record-breaking monarch. And so it's easy to kind of go through this weekend as we think of street parties and just sort of checking in with the TV as to what perhaps the royals are doing, or perhaps even be entirely disinterested. But like it or not, we are living through history, and the pictures that we see on our televisions, the newspapers that we buy, these will be the stuff of history in the future. They say, you know, journalism is the first draft of history. We're living through it now and we're creating it. So, yeah, this is an unprecedented event in British history. And, yeah, one that we haven't seen the likes of before.
Anna, what do you think the Queen's last 70 years, there are a lot to actually pack into those 70 years. We've been discussing earlier in the show about the Commonwealth achievements, very important to Her Majesty. What do you think the history books will actually say the Queen's greatest achievement is? Do you agree that it'll be the Commonwealth, or do you actually have a different point to make?
I mean, the Commonwealth certainly has been important. You know, it had less than 10 countries in that organisation, a free organisation of countries, many whom have been former British colonies. Yeah. Now over 54 countries are members of the Commonwealth. It's been seen as very important to the Queen. She is head of the Commonwealth. And she has expressed hopes that her son, Prince Charles, will succeed her as head of the Commonwealth, although that isn't inherited right. She is also Queen in 14 countries in the Commonwealth, where she remains head of state. A number of Caribbean countries, one that, of course, departed last year, Barbados, also Australia, Canada, New Zealand. So I think the Commonwealth as an organisation, and to some extent, perhaps a lesser extent, the fact that she's remained head of state in those other countries too will be seen as an achievement. I think the future of the links with Britain in those countries is now very tenuous, as we've seen with the recent royal tours. But I think more broadly, the fact that the monarchy has survived and indeed even thrived during the last 70 years, which has been a period of unprecedented change. And you know, many institutions have been scrutinised and, you know, undermined in many ways, particularly institutions that are fundamentally based on privileged birthright, not on merit, not on hard work. You know, there is so much inherent wealth in the royal family and in the monarchy. So in many ways, so out of touch with the times. The Queen came to the throne. The telegram was the primary means of communication. It's now the tweet. Travel was by ship. Now it can take, you know, several just hours rather than days on a plane, or, you know, and so on. So I think constancy and stability in a world of unprecedented change will probably be her significant legacy. And the fact that the monarchy has endured, and despite being apparently so at odds with the age, it has managed to maintain support, popularity, and to some extent, certainly in some people's view, a value, a relevance in today's world.
Yeah, Anna, on that point of perhaps being at odds with the contemporary times that we live in, the Commonwealth have decided that His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, will take over as the head after Her Majesty the Queen. Do you actually think that's sustainable? Do you think the Commonwealth will continue in that vein? Will it actually survive and outlive Her Majesty the Queen?
I mean, to some extent, the Commonwealth is an organisation that, although the Queen has seen it as important, and she's obviously presided over the Commonwealth heads of government meetings and has tried to be the kind of glue that's bound those nations together, increasingly, you know, economics, politics, diplomacy also has been the glue that's kept those countries together. So whether or not the Commonwealth as a set of countries, an independent organisation, survives, in some ways, I don't think it is made or, you know, make or break on whether the Queen retains the position as head of the Commonwealth, and a sense that Prince Charles, it might all sort of dissolve, if you like. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think if the Commonwealth fractured as an organisation, it wouldn't simply be about who was head of the organisation. I think what is more likely is that countries, particularly in the Caribbean, where the crown, the British crown remains crowned there, in other words, the Queen or the King, as he would be, is head of state there. I think there's every sense that those countries are finding the prospect of a foreign, white British monarch as their king or queen unsustainable. I mean, the idea that a royal would just sort of swan in for a week or two a year, or every few years on a royal tour and then go again, just seems really unsustainable. We saw those images on the royal tour of William and Kate in particular, which kind of comes at a time when Black Lives Matter protests, calls for reparations are getting louder and louder. And I think the monarchy there, or the British monarchy there, is really becoming unsustainable. So I think that will change. Whether, in fact, the Commonwealth as an organisation continues to exist, I think it probably will. I think there's enough self-interest for the countries themselves to retain in that sort of free association. But certainly, I think with the loss of the Queen, there won't be this charismatic figurehead that many heads of state, look to and delight in visiting, and her hosting them at heads of government meetings.
Well, Anna, I think the Commonwealth is unapologetically a force for good around the world in its current form. But going away from that ever so slightly, I believe that I saw that were you in London yesterday, Anna, enjoying the festivities?
I was enjoying the booze and the cheers and the jeers, discuss at length what you think they might be. I certainly was there outside St Paul's. I was commentating at the time when Boris Johnson arrived and was booed. And I have to say, as I've said sort of repeatedly, and very much against the views of some Conservative MPs who weren't there, it was a cacophony of boos. It felt like an amphitheatre. Or a kind of Wembley arena when the players run onto the pitch, but rather than cheers, there were jeers. I mean, it really was quite loud. And it was a moment where the Prime Minister really had nowhere to hide. I mean, the sun was beating down on the stairs of St Paul's as he ascended them. They seemed to go on forever from his point of view, I'm sure. And the noise was deafening.
What about the noise for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Meghan?
Yeah, that was more, I mean, there was some cheers, but it was actually less than the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And I think certainly the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge will have taken some wry delight in that, in a sense, Harry and Meghan didn't steal the show. Yes, there were crowds cheering for them, but actually the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge got the loudest cheers.
Well, Anna, I can't say I'm especially surprised at the crowd that cheers Sadiq Khan is going to boo Boris Johnson, but there we are. Dr. Anna Whitelock, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. That was Anna Whitelock, the historian and director of the Centre for the Study of Modern Monarchy. Now, folks, more than 70 aircraft took part in a Jubilee flypast on Thursday to mark Her Majesty's 70 years on the throne. The airborne salute from the Royal Navy, Army and Royal Air Force gathered over South East England before congregating for a final approach over Buckingham Palace. It was watched by Her Majesty the Queen and members of the royal family. It culminated with Britain's world-renowned precision air display team, the RAF Red Arrows, soaring over London with their trademark red, white and blue smoke trails. It was a sight to behold. Joining me now is Jace Hawker, Wing Commander and former Red Arrows pilot who rejoined the Air Force a year ago and has been heavily involved in the strategic planning of this year's Jubilee flypast. Jace, you also flew Concorde during the Golden Jubilee back in 2002. What was that like?
Not flying Concorde. I was part of the Red Arrows at that time in 2002 for the Queen's Golden Jubilee, where the Red Arrows, we had 4 aircraft on each wing of Concorde, one behind, trailing red, white and blue smoke for Her Majesty on that occasion. And just as it was on Thursday, the Mall was absolutely packed with people. I can still, as I talk about it now, I get a tingling sensation down my spine. And that's what the pilots will have experienced when they were undertaking the flypast, a magnificent flypast of 70 aircraft from the Navy, the Army and the Royal Air Force on Thursday.
Jace, what is it like, though? You put all this preparation into it. You must be trembling with fear, or does the adrenaline just take over and you realise you've got to pull it off? The world is watching.
Well, I was fortunate enough during my time on the Red Arrows to do a number of flypast over London for Her Majesty, and it doesn't matter whether it's your first or the fifth or the whatever, there's a sense of pressure. You have to get it right. Not just Her Majesty is watching, the world is often watching, and we're our own worst enemies when it comes to scrutinising our own performance. We strive for perfection, not just the Red Arrows, but everybody that was involved in the flypast. And the aim is to make something that is very difficult, very complicated to execute, look quite simple, look easy, of course look spectacular, and also be safe. And to achieve that, it takes months of planning by detailed, the pilots involved, the staff on the ground, the air traffic controllers controlling the airspace, And as you mentioned, all those 70 aircraft are travelling at different speeds. The helicopters at the front are doing 100 miles an hour. The jets at the back are doing 300. And of course, they all have to compress over the top of the palace within a 6-minute window. And that takes a lot of planning. And then they also consider the what ifs. What if the weather's bad? What if an aircraft has a problem? What if they can't talk to each other? What if another aircraft comes in and disturbs the flypast? These things will have been discussed, planned in meticulous detail to make such a spectacular event over the top of London. Unfortunately, the skies were blue, the sun was shining, and the aircraft, I think they all looked absolutely amazing.
Oh, they did. I think I speak for all of my viewers when I say that actually we're so appreciative for all that you guys did. It's absolutely phenomenal. It was beautiful to see. What does the Queen's Platinum Jubilee actually mean to the forces, do you think? Do you actually believe that having Her Majesty the Queen as head of the armed forces, we often, I think, forget that, don't we? How important has Her Majesty the Queen been throughout your time serving your country?
Well, Her Majesty is the head of the armed forces, has a vital part to play in everything that we do, whether it's the other members of the royal family being part and colonels and air commodores and admirals of regiments and squadrons. It means a lot, and you'll see most of the armed forces personnel nowadays, they'll have a chest full of medals. On the back of each of those medals is the figurehead of Her Majesty. We wear those with pride for the work that we've achieved, but also for representing her in all that we do. And the trooping of the colour on Thursday involved the Army, the tri-service flypast on Thursday by the Navy, the Army and the Air Force, as well as all of the other events that will be going on this weekend, just show how important she is. And it's us saying thank you for your service to the nation over the past 70 years.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, Tom Cruise's Top Gun, a new version of that film is out in the cinemas at the minute, but you lot, I think, have put them to shame, and they've got goodness only knows how much money to put on that Hollywood production. But Wing Commander and former Red Arrows pilot Jace Hawker, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, millions of you across the country will be celebrating the Platinum Jubilee today. In fact, a staggering 16,000 street closures have been approved, and there have been many more thousands of parties going on ahead of this historic 4-day event. What's going on your street? Live music, life-size cutouts of Her Majesty, buntings galore, I have no doubt. Let's go over to Ipswich now to see how some things are going down there. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by GBNews' very own East of England reporter, Ed Crawford. Hiya, Ed. What's the atmosphere like there?
Hello, good afternoon, Darren. Yes, the atmosphere is electric here. I'm now down in Ipswich town centre, and there's hundreds, possibly even thousands of people who have come out to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Now, it's a very special occasion, and a lot of people have been reminiscing and telling me about the positive experiences they've had when they've met the royals. A lot of people have met the royal family, and they've come away with very, very strong emotions. They feel touched. Now, one such lady is Lorraine. So, Lorraine, could you please tell me about when you met Her Majesty?
I met her at Windsor Castle in 1992 with the rest of the family. It was the Garter Day at Windsor Castle, so we were out back at the Horseshoe Cloisters, and lovely day, lovely day.
Fantastic. And what brought you out here today? Have you come specifically to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee?
Yes and no. We didn't realise it was going on because we've got to do our own things at home. But yeah, it's nice to see so many people out here.
No, definitely. And it's a really wonderful experience here because they're showing the trooping of the colours. There's people from all different backgrounds and groups here, and everyone's really, really getting on. A lot of people are saying that the royal family are a bit of an inspiration. Would you say the Queen is a bit of an inspiration?
Definitely. I think she's brought everyone out, brought us up to the modern day. She's really, really good.
No, definitely.
She's grown with the times.
Fantastic. Well, I think after 2 long years of difficult times, it's really good that the country's coming together to celebrate the Jubilee. So, thanks very much, Darren.
Absolutely, that's perfect. I mean, do you actually think that these celebrations are there going to be a lot of hangovers tomorrow? Have you seen a lot of booze?
Yes, certainly. Some of the people I spoke to earlier were enjoying a bit of Prosecco, and I think there's a lot of people who are going to be enjoying a few fizzy pops later. So, yeah, it's going to be good.
You deserve it, you deserve it. I can't get too on it because I'm at work tomorrow on this show, which of course everyone at home will be watching, Ed. But Ed, I hope
it's a
you
shame.
manage to have a good
You win some, you lose some.
Absolutely, this is so true. I hope everyone gets out and enjoys it, though. That was GB News' East of England reporter, Ed Crawford. It looks fantastic there, actually. And I tell you what, it's really, really quite touching to see so many Union Jacks. Now, folks, I have got the Grime Watch we've got coming up now, have we? Am I hearing that right? No. Yeah. No, possibly. Right, folks. Now, we've got Grime Watch coming up on... This is my part of the show where actually we champion your views and put forward what it is that you've got to say. Now, you've been telling me in large numbers, actually, that you are really pleased to see the Union Jack flying, and that actually it's Pride Month this month. You might have seen that, people waxing lyrical about Pride Month. This, to me, right, we should be flying that flag. It's that flag that represents democracy. It's that flag that represents values that have been championed around the world. It's that flag that actually represents equality in law and in wider society. So that's the one that I'll be flying, not just for Her Majesty the Queen, but actually for, I think, so much more than that. It is a beautiful, beautiful flag. Not just a beautiful design, but actually beautiful what it represents. That's what I said. Shocks me that there are so many flying the Pride flag, but not the Union Jack. Why don't we do away with identity politics and checklists? We're British. That's something to celebrate. Gay, straight, bi, black, brown, whatever. You've won the lottery of life if you're born here. And I totally stand by that. I tell you that for free. There was a tweet here, actually, to say, well, so many of you, Rosemary actually said she totally agrees. Identity politics is divisive. National celebrations can unite if we're willing. She says, I'm truly proud to be British, flaws and all. I've got Jubilee flags bunting, as do my neighbours. We're using this occasion to get together and connect. And I think, you know, my grandma was out on her street yesterday. What I find really beautiful is what Rosemary says there about being united. It's brought people together. And I think that's a really incredibly beautiful thing. I really, really do. But let me know what you've been getting up to. Tweet me at GBNews. Now, folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, as ever. I thank you very much for your company, and I hope to see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. But for now, I'm going to leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry across northern areas, but there's a risk of thundery showers further south. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, it'll be drier than earlier on in the day for most, but there is still a risk of a thundery and heavy shower through the evening. Across the southeast, for many, it will be dry but quite cloudy. Later on in the evening, there may be heavy showers for some. In the south of Wales, it'll be a mixed picture, feeling warm in any late sunshine, but for many, it'll be cloudy with a risk of showers. Across the Midlands, it'll be a rather cloudy evening. Some may catch a shower, but by and large, it should remain dry until later on in the night, when there is a warning in force. Northeastern England will see the cloud from the North Sea push back in from the coast, so a dull evening, feeling cooler than the day as well. In southern Scotland, there'll be some late sunshine, but some eastern coast could see cloudier skies after a warm day. It'll chill off after dusk here too. Finally, in Northern Ireland, it'll be a fine evening with some sunshine for many areas, a little cooler along the coast, however, with a risk of cloudier skies. For the rest of the evening, heavy and thundery rain will push up from the south, drier further north. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns.